The Quinnipiac women's ice hockey team were unable to close out their 6-game homestand victorious as they fell 1-2 to the University of New Hampshire. I'm Naomi Gray alongside Mike Dalton, and this is the Rebound. Quinnipiac entered this game after a 4-2 loss against UNH on Friday night, and head coach Cassandra Turner mentioned that both of the teams had a lot of similarities, but Quinnipiac was unable to come out on top. Mike, what were some things that stood out about University of New Hampshire this weekend?
Oh, it's got to be their tenacity, Naomi. I mean, they were just, it's go hard or go home for this Wildcat team. Even when, they were ahead a goal or two, they would still have their foot on the gas pedal like they would be down a goal. And Quinnipiac just kind of lacked that. Whenever, like when Bonsteel scored the first goal in the first game, Quinnipiac just kind of took a step back, and that's not exactly what you should do. It's hockey. It can change at any point in the game. And, even though the Bobcats are known to be a team where if they score in the first period, then they hold on to that lead and they just never seem to let go, obviously anything can happen. And this UNH Wildcat team did a very good job of responding.
UNH is actually a Hockey East team, so this is the out-of-conference matchup. How much do you think that them being a Hockey East team affected this weekend's play?
Well, I mean, ECAC has come a long way in the past couple of years, but Hockey East is just still on a whole different level compared to ECAC. I mean, they have BC number 1 in their conference, number 2 in the country. I mean, they've lost one time this whole season. They are 16-1-3. And they also have to face other teams like Providence, Maine, and UNH is 4th in their conference. So to be, kind of up there with the big names like Maine, Providence, BC, that's impressive. And for Quinnipiac, they're also 4 games ahead of everyone else in their conference besides Princeton. And so, the pressure is on for them to win, even though it doesn't always look like it, and this is a non-conference game.
Right. And though the team couldn't find any type of victories together this weekend, a lot of players made a lot of individual success. Melissa Skamiskevich, she scored her 11th goal of the season, and that already tops what she did last year. And Brooke Bonsteel, she now has 8 goals for the season, and that's incredible for a freshman.
It really is incredible, Naomi. I mean, last year, Kenzie Prater was sort of the standout freshman for the Bobcats, but even she was still, she'd get on a little bit of a hot streak here and there, and then she kind of, get cold for a couple games. But Bonsteel has just shown consistency, and that's one thing Cass Turner has really just sort of stressed to this team all year, is that they need to start being consistent, not just with players scoring goals, but just winning.
And while we're on the topic of individual players, Q30's MJ Baird broke news on Wednesday that sophomore forward Abby Clary was asked to leave the team. Her last game was played December 2nd, and after that, it was announced on December 5th that we kind of got the hint that she would no longer be a part of the team, but it's still up in the air. And while this is still a mystery, how do you think the team has been dealing without her presence on the ice?
Well, I think they've been dealing with it just fine. I mean, she's one of many forwards, obviously, but it was a little shocking to me personally, Naomi, because, she was getting more starts this season. Abby Clary last year, she was more of just like a depth person, like, a 3rd or 4th liner. But at the beginning of the year, she was a 2nd, maybe even a 1st liner at times. And, she got 2 goals and 3 assists, which isn't, a ton, but every point helps, obviously. And so it's definitely a surprise, but it's college hockey. You just got to roll with the punches. Things are going to change. Every team in 4 years is going to be completely different. So it's just one of those things you got to accept, and hope that she, does well in University of Vermont.
Absolutely. Yeah, this team has gone through a lot so far this season, I feel like. There's been a lot of changes, but they've been able to come out victorious in some senses, and the losses that they have picked up haven't been anything that has been too brutal. This weekend's losses, even though it was out of conference, it still is going to affect them and put them a few steps back in the ECAC. So where do you think that the Bobcats will find themselves in the standings moving forward?
I honestly think the Bobcats will fall a few places. Surprisingly, they are right there with Colgate, who is, a very good team. They're on, top 10 for USCHO poll and everything. They've been on there for a couple weeks now. But I do think the Bobcats will start to fall a little bit back to reality, because all 3 of those teams, as I just mentioned, they're 4 games behind Quinnipiac. So when they get those 4 games, Clarkson's probably going to win all 4 of them.
Right.
Would not be surprised if Cornell won 3 of their 4 and Colgate won 3 of their 4. So then, the Bobcats are going to find themselves, several games behind everyone else. And it's just one thing you gotta the pressure to win is there.
Yeah, absolutely. The pressure is definitely on, like you mentioned. And like you mentioned as well, 6 more games left of the season, all ECAC action. Next weekend, they're taking their talents to New York to go against RPI and Union. Both of those games are back-to-back, another weekend series. And the last time the Bobcats played these two teams were back in November, also another weekend series. But they did find success. And this late in the season, that's all they could hope for, to bring out those W's. And that does it for this week's edition of The Rebound, presented by Q30 Sports. For Mike Dalton, I'm Naomi Gray. Have a good night.